Big 12 Radio, Big 12 Today, heard on TuneIn, watched on Big 12 Studios, and our Spring Caravan Tour, making a stop right now in Fort Worth as our Modelo Spring Caravan rolls along. Let's talk TCU Spring Football with the Horned Frogs head coach, Sonny Dykes. And, super excited to see your team this year because, this will be a whole new team for you, seemingly, especially on offense, where you turned to Gordon Samus as the offensive coordinator, and this will be a little bit different, I think, offensively than what you've been.
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit different. But again, to the casual fan, I don't know how much difference they're going to notice. Little more reliance maybe on tight ends. I think our tight end room is really strong. We'll play a little bit more with 2 tight ends maybe than we have in the past, sometimes 3 tight ends. The passing game is something that's really familiar to me. It's more pro style, a little bit more air raid based. The passing game is, and again, that's something that I'm very familiar with. So really like the meshing of those concepts. Reminds me a lot of the things that I was doing as an offensive coordinator when I was at Arizona back 2007, 8, 9. We had a good tight end room with Rob Gronkowski and Chris Gronkowski, his brother, and some really good players. So we did some kind of different things then, about a lot of 12 personnel, some 13. So it's going to be a lot of that mix. And again, I'm really excited about it. I think it fits our personnel well. It's going to allow us, I think, to be a little bit more physical and consistent in our run game. That's something that we have not been as consistent as we need to be. And we need to become a more physical football team. I think the biggest thing that when you go and you study Gordy and the success that he's had, particularly there at UConn, they just didn't turn the ball over very much. And that's been an issue of ours the last couple of years. We've turned the ball over too much. And he's done a really good job of not doing that. And so that's one of the things that drew me to him. Really liked what they were doing offensively, but loved the way that they were playing the game.
Yeah, Coach, I've got to know Gordon a little bit from even when he was back at William & Mary and then the last couple of years at UConn. And I know he's obsessed with like that old school zone-based rushing attack from the Denver Broncos of the 90s and early 2000s. But the turnover piece is really interesting to me. What made that part so attractive to you during the process? Is that scheme-based? Is that his personnel? Like what all went into that, you think?
Yeah, I mean, turnovers – how turnovers occur and why they occur, we could sit here and that could be a dozen shows in itself. As you said, though, I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I think, it has something to do with scheme. I think it has a lot to do with avoiding 3rd and long situations, where your quarterback's getting pressure. I think it has something to do with your personnel. Josh Hoover was a really good player for us, but, he turned the ball over 42 times in the last 31 games. And so, if you went and look at their quarterback last year, I think he turned it over 3 times the entire season. And so that's been something that has really hurt us the last couple of years. And again, a lot of that wasn't Josh. Some of it was the situations that we put him into. Some, a lot of, like I said, a lot of the 3rd down and long situations. I think a lot of that has to do with scheme, kind of the clarity of the scheme and what you're doing and how you're doing it. A lot of it has to do with fundamentals. Ball security and coaching fundamentals, quarterback pocket presence, protection up front, all the different things go into that. And so when you turn the football over, a lot of times people want to put it on the quarterback or they want to put it on a running back or they want to put it on the offensive line if the quarterback's getting pressure. But, man, there's a lot of factors that go into it, and we've got to do a better job of running to the ball offensively, finishing plays. When you hand the ball off and your running back breaks and he gets the ball punched out like what happened against us at the end of the Iowa State game last year. You need to have a bunch of offensive players that are hustling down the field and can cover the ball. And so there's a million different things that go into it, but hopefully that's going to be a big improvement of ours. The last 2 years, there's been too many games that we played in where we just didn't give ourselves a chance to win the game. We turned the ball over 4, 5, 6 times, and you're just not going to beat anybody in today's college football world doing that.
Sonny, I can't remember if it was your first year or your second year at TCU, or when we visited at Media Days, you mentioned that basically the team that's number 1 in rushing in the league wins the league. And
right.
That continues to be a thing. and for you guys, it feels like the right move with more of a run-oriented OC based on the running game not having been very kind to you the last couple of years.
Yeah, and as I said earlier, I think there's a lot of factors that go into that. Again, I think that the idea is always, blame the offensive line, but I think that there's a whole lot more than that going on behind the scenes. And so I just felt like we needed to do something different. And as I said, I had an opportunity to watch UConn play. I think it was a Friday night game a couple of years ago, and turned the game on and didn't really know much about what they were doing, liked the style of play, just thought that they looked like a well-organized, well-thought-out scheme. I thought their guys played really physical, played really hard. And I don't know that they had the most talented players. Those guys just played at a high level. And so that's when I began to follow UConn a little bit, and they caught my eye and studied them at the end of the year, and then kind of did the same thing this year. And, when I had an opportunity to hire Gordon, it just made sense.
Yeah, and to your point, Coach, their quarterback, Joe Fignano, he got the deepest into the season among any FBS quarterback without a single interception. And then you bring in Jaden Craig. I know that, it's open here in the spring, but you've got to like the fact that he had just 12 interceptions across over 700 attempts. He's got like a 1.68 interception rate in terms of percentage. So tell us about Jaden Craig.
Yeah, that's honestly where it started for us, was when, when we began to sense that there may be, Josh may be looking around as far as jumping in the portal. Jaden was a guy, we saw the film early. The more we dove into what he did, we thought it made a lot of sense to us. Gordy was familiar with him in terms of, they were both kind of on the East Coast, both from the same area. Those two guys, as we hired Gordy and started recruiting Jaden, those two guys meshed. I think they're on the same page. I think they both understand what it takes to win football games. The great thing about Jaden is he's a really smart guy. I mean, he's a Harvard grad. Last time I checked, I'm not a Harvard grad. And I don't know that anybody on our staff is either. So it all starts with a smart guy. It all starts with somebody who takes care of the football. And, oh, by the way, he happens to be really talented. I mean, he's 6'3", he's 230 pounds. He's got a huge arm. He can make all the throws. He's really good in the pocket. And as you said, he turned the football over very little. And again, I think all of those are factors that really drew us together. And I think he was interested in playing this style of offense and having a chance to play in the Big 12 and in front of 50,000 people every week and a big TV audience and improve his draft stock. And, we have had a lot of success through the years with quarterbacks. And I think that the marriage made sense in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And not just him, but you got a running back from the Colorado School of Mines. You've got a defensive end from Western Kentucky. So, you're really dipping into the non-traditional football schools in order to find some transfers. And, I think there's probably two schools of thought that stand out in terms of, former 4 or 5 stars. And you've certainly, played that game too with, some of these guys that maybe haven't worked out in one spot versus guys that maybe produce at G5 or FCS schools that have produced, and it feels like you're dipping more into the guys that have put up numbers even at the Colorado School of Mines or at Western Kentucky.
Yeah, I think when you kind of make the deep dive into, the analytics of do you take a chance on a 4 or 5 star player that hasn't produced someplace, or do you, recruit and try to bring in a player that has been really, really productive, maybe at a smaller level. For us, the kids that have, been successful at smaller levels have really been good players for us. And you go back and look at the number of transfers that we've had, those guys have produced at a high level. And so that's kind of been our philosophy is, go find somebody who has been a very, very good football player that's been productive, that's been able to stay healthy, that's a leader in his team, and bring those guys in and try to develop them, pour all the resources we have into them, get them into our nutrition program, get them in our strength and conditioning program, get them involved in all the recovery modalities and all the different things that we do to, we think, maximize guys. And those guys have produced for us. So that's been our school of thought, and it seems to be the thing that's worked the best for us.
Coach, what were you looking for in the portal for offensive linemen? Because you bring in Noah McKinney, who had a really strong grade from Pro Football Focus at Oklahoma State, and then the Buchanan kid from FIU, where he started 17 games at left guard and 7 at center. Like, he's super versatile. Just tell us about your kind of the way you attacked the O-line.
Yeah, for us, it was productivity, as you said. I mean, Noah played at a high level at Oklahoma State. It was a rough year for those guys, and he played really, really hard, played well under some tough circumstance. And so, that was the thing I think that drew us to him. And, and it's just been productivity. And so we're excited about those two additions. I think they're going to be both good players for us. I think they're both good fits for what we want to do offensively. So really excited about them both.
What does your spring look like, and have you changed or evolved in your thinking in terms of how you handle spring football?
Yeah, I think you have to a little bit. I mean, obviously there's not as big a roster now as there was in the past. Now, the one thing that is different is, pretty much every player is here other than a couple of the freshman players that did not graduate early. And so we've got more of a percentage of our players that are going to be here for spring ball than we've probably ever had in the past. We just don't have as many players, as the roster reductions start to affect us a little bit more every year. That number is going to dwindle down to 105 eventually. You've got to be a little bit more creative in what you do. I think that, staying healthy, and I think Indiana proved this as they made a run through the college football playoff. Staying healthy is probably as important as anything. If you go back and look at our 22 team, that played for a national championship, we stayed healthy. And it's something that we haven't necessarily done the last couple of years. We've been pretty banged up. We had a lot of surgeries this past year, way too many. And so we've got to do a good job of developing a physical mentality of, just being tough and understanding how difficult that is to develop that. And the only way that you become tough is you got to work through some tough situations. And so, there's always the balance between what's too much and what's not enough. But we're going to have a very physical, tough 15 practices. But at the same time, we're going to need to do a really good job of taking care of our players and making sure that we get through spring, developing them at a very, very high level, but also making sure that we don't, beat up a bunch of guys and end up having a bunch of significant injuries.
Sonny, I know that it's so early. We're just heading into the spring, but you guys playing that game over in Ireland against North Carolina to kick off the season, which is awesome for the fans and the experience and everything that goes into it. But it's also kind of been a kiss of death for some schools. So have you thought about, like, how do we manage the mental aspect and the travel and just everything that goes into a game of that magnitude?
Yeah, it has taken its toll on a lot of teams. I mean, if you went and looked at Kansas State and Iowa State last year, I mean, they were two of the favorites, going into the Big 12 season, and they both went and played there and then didn't play particularly well after that game. The one thing that, as we sat down and started talking about doing this, the one thing that was kind of a must-have for me was an open date following the game. And so we're fortunate, neither Iowa State or Kansas State had an open date last year. They had to come back and play immediately. We weren't going to do that to our players. I just didn't think that was the best situation for our guys. So, we'll have an opportunity to get back here, get rested up, get refocused, and, and hopefully be able to pick up where we left off. And it won't be that taxing, trying to catch up with rest, all the type of things, and get ready for the next opponent. We'll have a chance to catch our breath a little bit, recover, and then start getting ready to go play Grambling after that game.
Sonny Dykes, head football coach at TCU. Sonny, thanks as always for your time. Have a great spring. We'll talk to you again soon. Take care.
Yeah, appreciate you guys. Look forward to catching up with you soon.
Thanks, Sonny. All right, thanks to Sonny Dykes for joining us here on our spring tour. This is our Modelo Spring Caravan because there is no off season. Remember, there's no off and off season. There's only research. Modelo Spring Football, earned, not given. The full-time fan from Modelo knows no off season. All right, it's Big 12 Today, presented by Modelo, heard on TuneIn, watched on Big 12 Studios.